Dobar dan means good day. A couple minutes late today, my apologies. Traffic and whatnot. This is TalkCast PDX. You can find us on the web, talkcastpdx.com. It's Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. The name of the show is The Bogdanich Perspective, and I'm your host, Paul Bogdanich, and welcome. I'm going to call the title of today's show Known Unknowns. How's that? Maybe a picture of Donald Rumsfeld. But known unknowns. Anyway, I just saw something in the news that I just have to mention. Scientists at the European Southern Observatory observed what's called an exoplanet, which is a habitable planet orbiting a star where it's in the zone where it could support liquid water and all the rest of this stuff, has sufficient mass and all the rest of that stuff. And in this article, they said that it's only, quote, only 35 light years from Earth, which, compared to the composition of the galaxy is very close. But 35 light years happens to be 205,765 billion miles. If you took a spacecraft and accelerated it at 1G, so that we would be comfortable. We would be at 1G. And then you went halfway there and then turned around and decelerated it at 1G so that we would be comfortable the whole time. You would end up going 6 times faster than the speed of light at maximum speed, which is impossible. But even if you could figure out that technical problem, it would take you 700 years to make a one-way trip. So it's good that they found it. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but I mean, only 35 billion or only 35 light years. I said last week that Hurricane Henry was stuck in the North Atlantic. Oops, right? Interesting. They do, I say I follow statistical and earthquake models because of the analysis they use, and I like to keep up on it. And they use the models that they use for hurricanes at a lower latitude, on Henry. And they turned out not to work at the northern latitude. It was predicted to meander around the North Atlantic, turn north and east, and then dissipate. It went straight south, got over warmer waters, strengthened, then went straight north and hit Rhode Island. A lot of flooding, a lot of power outage. The wind wasn't that strong by the time it hit, but still inconvenient, I'm sure. Saw an article in the financial blog, and the title of the article was Reasons for Recent Equity Weakness. And the guy's just making his points. He published this when the Dow happened to go down a day or two. But reasons for recent equity weakness. And I'm going to go over some of his points. To begin, I don't think there is any recent equity weakness. The Dow went above 4,000 for the first time in history on April 1st, 2021. In between April 1st and yesterday, Monday, when the Dow set a new all-time high, I might add, it is exactly 100 trading days in between April 1st and yesterday. And for the 100 trading days, the S&P 500 was up 60 of those 100 trading days. And of the 60 days, 35 days of them were new all-time highs, and only 40 days were down, obviously. So I don't consider that equity weakness, but I like his points. He says global M2, which is the global money supply, which is a nice way of saying the combined activity of all the central banks, that the rate of increase in global money supply is decreasing. And it's not the Fed. They're still printing at $120 to $180 billion a month. The conference in Jackson Hole is this week. Chairman Powell is scheduled to speak on Friday. Maybe he'll say something about it. But the other central banks, the rate of increase is decreasing. I saw an article yesterday that points to the Japanese central bank. But he says, M2 is the rate of increase is decreasing. The advanced decline line is declining. While having never mentioned the advanced decline line, I basically talk about this every week. The advanced decline line is where you take all the stocks in the S&P 500 and you count the number that go up and then you multiply that by the number that go down, or excuse me, you divide that by the number that go down, you create a ratio, and then you do a 10-day moving average on the ratio, or a 15-day moving average. And that's, quote unquote, the advanced decline line. If the advanced decline line is increasing and the prices of equities as measured by the index are increasing, that means that the increase in share price is broadly distributed. Okay. If the advanced decline line is decreasing and the price of equities are decreasing, that means that the decline in share price is broadly distributed. The situation that we have now is the advanced decline line is decreasing while the price of equities is increasing, which means that the gains are being concentrated in fewer and fewer stocks. And I talk about that every week. It's the large cap stocks, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Tesla, Berkshire Hathaway, Visa, NVIDIA, JP Morgan, Johnson & Johnson, and so on. And I go over that every week without mentioning the advanced decline line, but yeah, that's a definite effect. He also mentions that the Chinese yuan, their international currency is called the renminbi, as I recall, something like that, renminbi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the domestic currency they refer to as the yuan. And he's saying that the value of the Chinese yuan compared to the US dollar is decreasing. That's true, but there's a reason for that. And we can't conveniently mention the reason for that in our press, but I'm going to go over it with you. They're what they call their paramount leader or president or whatever, but Xi Jinping, we westernized his name to Xi, gave another major speech, and he noted that 600 million Chinese, roughly a little less than half of the population, exist on less than 1,000 yuan a month. Top earners in China earn in between 100,000 and 500,000 yuan a month, and the per capita average is 30,000 yuan a month. And he gave a major speech, and he announced what he's calling a common prosperity program. What that means is he's going to address the wealth inequality in his country. He wants every Chinese citizen, including those at the bottom, to earn more than 30,000 yuan a month, in between 30 and 100,000 yuan a month. And the only way to do that is to flatten the wealth inequality. He's calling it a common prosperity program. I don't speak Mandarin. I don't read Mandarin. So it's very difficult to gauge exactly what he said. He gave a pivotal sentence, and I read the Western translations, and they uniformly throw the word socialism in there. If you read the Eastern translations, there is no word socialism in there. But as near as I can tell, not reading Mandarin, what he said was, common prosperity is an essential requirement and key feature of Chinese-style modernization. Okay, all translations agree that he said that he wants a, quote, people-centered development philosophy, unquote, and all translations say that he said he wants, quote, restraints on unreasonable income. Now, to get back to why that would make the value of the Chinese yuan decrease compared to the value of the US dollar is rather simple. What he's saying is that the prosperity that they're generating should be more broadly shared. The only way to do that is to put restraints on unreasonable income and share the wealth more broadly. And if you're a dyed-in-the-wool laissez-faire capitalist, that is against your religion because it's functionally limiting corporate profits, right? And so you move some of your money out of China to someplace where they don't limit corporate profits. And that causes the value of the Chinese domestic currency to weaken slightly against the US dollar. China's only been modernizing since 1974. When they started modernizing, there was a concern about how big they would get, how fast. And Kagan and Krauthammer and Krugman and Summers and all these people argued that they wouldn't be able to manage the rate of growth, and that to get even near as large as the disparity at the time, call it in the 1980s or early 90s, that it would take till 2100, right? They did it by 2020. Okay, so they're 80 years early. They've done a fantastic job of managing that rate of growth that all our experts said they couldn't do. Okay, the way they did that is that they very carefully study history, and they look, because their system was just created in 1949. Right? And this prosperity program's only been going on since 1974. So they had tons of history to look at, and they looked at all of it and saw what worked and what didn't work, what they could adapt to their system, what they couldn't. And they chose the best examples, and they've been going with that. And some things are clear. When the Soviet Union fell, there was a guy by the name of Alexei Buzgalin, youngest member of the Politburo when the Soviet Union dissolved in 1990. And roughly by the late 90s, he had developed a thesis for the underlying cause of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And he said the main reason is the population became dispirited with the system. And he said the main reason that the population became dispirited with the system was the production and distribution system. When you went into a grocery store, it was a state store. There weren't 5 different kinds of ketchup that you could buy. There were no luxury items that you could look at and aspire to, but not afford. And he concluded that created a sense of resignation and hopelessness in the population, and that contributed to the dispirited population, and that's why the Soviet Union dissolved. And it's clear that the Chinese learned that lesson, right? Very first thing they did, particularly in the 90s under Hu Jintao, was consumerism, right? They gave people, the luxury items to aspire to, the consumer choice. They obviously learned that one. In their quest for common prosperity, a flattening of the income distribution, I would urge them, and I hope they have, it would be hard to miss. We did that under Dwight David Eisenhower from 1952 to 1960. We repaid all the debts from the Second World War. Mr. Eisenhower's social policies were a continuation of the old policies. As George Wallace put it, segregation then, segregation now, segregation forever. And when we went to adjust the inequality in society, we threw out the economic baby with the bathwater. Okay. But if you look at the income distribution, Dwight David Eisenhower did exactly what they're trying to do. And the way that he did it was he didn't use an authoritarian structure. He had tremendous popular support. He was the commanding general, and most of the voting population at that time, voting rights were further restricted than they are today too, but most of the voting population at that time was veterans, right? And he was the commanding general of all these veterans, so he had tremendous popular support, and he pushed through a tax program that paid off all the war debts and distributed income rather equally. Think of the old TV shows. I wrote some of them down. Leave It to Beaver, My Three Sons, Father Knows Best, right? Father Knows Best, the guy was an insurance salesman. My Three Sons, the guy was an engineer, the single income earner of the family. Leave It to Beaver, they never said where he worked, but when his coworker came over, they used to refer to it as the salt mine. So, it was just some, big corporation, but single income earner. If you're like me in this area, a school teacher or a firefighter back in those days, single income, could have a house, 2 cars, and kids, right? My neighbors when I was growing up, guy worked for the post office, house, 2 car, 2 kids, single income. And that's the way the system used to work. It was a flatter, income distribution. And the way Mr. Eisenhower did that was through the tax policy, no authoritarianism required. Okay, first thing he did was the progressive taxation, where you have brackets, and as you move into the higher bracket, your tax on income increases, right? He put what Zai describes as a restraint on unreasonable income. In other words, he set a maximum amount that people should be able to earn. And above that marginal rate, income was taxed at 90%. And he used to have to defend that. And every press conference he did, go back and watch. Very unpopular, but he had the support of the people. And so he managed to push that through. The other element was he put restraints on transfer of income at basis. Supposing you're Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, and when you created Amazon or Microsoft, respectively, the day you formed the corporation, you gave yourself a goodly share of stock at a penny a share or less. And 20 years later, the stock's worth $1,000 a share. In Eisenhower's day, if you wanted to take that store of wealth and put it into a quote unquote nonprofit and then run the world through your nonprofit rather than your corporation, you were responsible for the increase in the value when you transferred the asset. Even though you got it at a penny, when you transferred it, it was worth $1,000. And to transfer it, you had to pay the capital gains tax difference on the penny and the $1,000. We've done away with that. Now we can, transfer income at basis. And so you have all these fortunes. He had an inheritance tax so that there was generational turnover. So basically what you have is a progressive income tax structure with restrictions on transfer and an inheritance tax. All right, that's 2 of the 3 legs. The third leg was for the corporations only. It was the retained earnings tax. Under Mr. Eisenhower, if you had a company that was making scads of money, in those days it was International Telephone and Telegraph. International Telephone and Telegraph, under their CEO, a guy by the name of Hal Janine, is where Nixon got the campaign contributions to, do the plumbers and the Ellsberg break-in and all the rest of that stuff. Hal Janine, the then chairman of International Telephone and Telegraph, gave him about $10 million in cash. But they had this, they had a corporation that was throwing off scads of cash. They broke them up, by the way. That's what's now ATT and then Quest and all that. They broke them up in those days. We don't do that now. Okay, but that's another matter. But there was a thing called the retained earnings tax. Okay, the modern equivalent is Apple Corporation. Just makes scads of money. All right. I went to their financial statements just to be accurate, and as of their last quarterly filing, they show $193,644,000,000 in cash and cash equivalents, mostly marketable securities. What they did with that money is they put it in a hedge fund that they run out of the Cayman Islands, and they trade stocks with it. But $194 billion, that's currently more money than the United States Treasury has, right? They're richer than the government. In Eisenhower's day, they used to limit the amount of cash that a corporation could accumulate to a ratio based on payables and receivables. And basically the nuts and bolts is Apple would be allowed to keep $40 billion as a reserve and whatnot against the 193 they have. And the other 153, they had a choice. They could pay their employees and people more, which means that they would fall into the higher tax brackets and, get taxed appropriately. They could pay dividends to shareholders. And in those days, dividends were taxable. So those people receiving the dividends would fall into the higher tax brackets and the government would get their share. And that there were three categories: pay dividends, increase expenses, or buy new plant and equipment. In other words, use it to create another business. But if they didn't do any of those things, okay, which we don't, which none of our modern corporations do, all right, they would come in there and they would impose a retained earnings tax and relieve them of the burden. They'd take their money, right? And you got to remember, if you pay it in dividends, all right, return it to shareholders. In those days, dividends were taxable. So the recipients of the dividend, it would throw them into the higher bracket. And if they went above the quote unquote level of unreasonable income, it would be taxed at 90%, right? And that's the way they paid off all the debts from World War II and flattened the income distribution. And that's how come they don't show any of these TV shows anymore, right? But Chairman Tsai, or Xi Jinping, has a lot of good examples to choose from. Don't need to do it with a heavy hand. All you have to do is make your tax structure roughly equivalent to what ours was from 1952 to 1964 by the time it changed. And then the other thing the guy mentions in his article about reasons for recent equity weakness is the Delta variant. All I'm going to say about that this week is that the numbers don't add up. Oh, back to the first thing, the Chinese. That's what I already said, but just to reiterate the point, that's why you'll never read it. What if he succeeds, for God's sake, right? What if in 5 years, these 600 million Chinese that are currently existing on 1,000 yuan a month, all of a sudden are making 10,000 yuan a month? What if he succeeds? Doesn't that go against our narrative that the wealth distribution is because capitalist go-getters go out there and create this, and it's not a function of big government and large corporations sharing a common bed. It's not systemic. There's nothing you can do about it. What if he succeeds? So they don't even want to, publish the fact that he's going to try. And that's how come you won't read that in our press, but that's the root cause for why the Chinese dollar is dipping. But anyway, to the Delta variant, all I'm going to say, this guy lists that as his other concern. And I'm going to say just the numbers don't add up. Something's wrong. In July, I did a show and I talked a little about it, and I said that if the death rate continues to decrease at the rate that it was currently decreasing at that time, that by mid-August, the death rate would be below that of suicides. It is mid-August. That didn't happen. On July 3rd, the death rate from coronavirus was 208 a day. Suicides are down around 160. By August 7th, okay, that's only a month, July 3rd to August 7th, they went from 208 a day to 635. All right, so 200 to 600 in round numbers is 100 to 300 is a triple. That's a 200% increase. They tripled in a month. Not being widely reported in any kind of sensationalistic fashion. That's change, but they've increased. It's a triple. I went through the age cohort. How many people in each age group, blah, 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 all to try and figure it out. Saw an interesting statistic. 18 people under 18 years old, since January 1st, 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, deaths from coronavirus, all variants, for people under 18, and this is as of last Friday, were 431 individuals. Okay. There are 81,630,000 people in the United States that are under 18 years old. So if you take 431 and divide that by 81,630,000, you come out with 0.000005, all right, which is 5/10,000th of 1%, or 1 in every 189,837 people. And when you dig into that, a significant percentage had childhood leukemia or other similar ailments. But what that means, the numbers don't make sense. All right, we've given 363 million doses of vaccine to 201 million people, with 173 million being fully vaccinated, right? If you adjust that for the age cohort, people under 18 typically aren't vaccinated, subtract that, you come up with a number for the United States in between 71 and 74% that are fully vaccinated. About over call it 40 or 50 years old, 71 to 74%. And these death rates are going up. Israel, for people over 50, has a greater than 85% vaccination rate, and their deaths are going up at a similar pace. And so something's amiss. If you look at what the CDC says about the Delta variant, they say there's a thing called R naught, which is if I get the virus, on average, how many people will I give it to? It's called the reproduction coefficient. The most communicable viral disease that we know of is measles, has an R naught of 18. Each person that gets it, on average, gives it to 18 other people. The other variable is called, I learned it when I learned the math, it was called cycle time. Now it's called serial interval. In other words, if I get it, how long does it take me to give it to the next person? And how long does it take them to give it to the person after that, and so on? And the cycle interval is 3 days. And if you take those two numbers and do the math on it, it indicates that basically more than 85% of the United States population has been infected or exposed to Delta virus by the end of this month, another week. And that doesn't square with this increase in death rate. So something's wrong. Don't know what it is. But as you may have noticed yesterday, they approved the Pfizer vaccine. They're going to compel everybody to take it. Very interesting. This is the write-up in the Wall Street Journal this morning. It says, and I quote, "The Food and Drug Administration approval was seen by public health officials as a key step to convince hesitant individuals to get the shot and to pave the way for more employers and schools to require it." All right, so which is it? Convince or compel? It's compel. By making it legal, they've made it, so that employers can mandate. They're compelling. Anyway, something's wrong. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to speak but anyway, I share his concern. Something's wrong. The numbers don't make sense. Let's go to the markets. We measure from Friday to Friday. Markets were down a little bit last week, which was last Friday. As of yesterday, Monday, they hit a new all-time high again. But as of last Friday, August 20th, they fell for that week 26 points. And if you have one of our hypothetical portfolios, you would have expected to lose $590. We have 4 portfolios, top 30 stocks in 2 of them, cap weight, equal weight. To adjust the skew, we have another one with all 11 sectors of the S&P, and then my discretionary portfolio. I'm sure you've heard them before. But the top 30 cap weight only lost $178 compared to the expected $590. Top 30 equal weight only lost $279 expected to the $590. And remember what we were saying, that means that the gains aren't ratably shared, right? In this case, that would be the advanced decline line increasing while the market value went down, right? Top 3, every sector, which is a broader portfolio, has all the sectors in it, lost $735, which is more than the $590. My portfolio, on the stocks alone, I lost $946, but my portfolio is fully hedged, and the hedges returned $957. So net, I made $11 for the period. If you look at the stocks, I'm going to go to it. We have there's all four portfolios. There's 54 stocks. Only one stock was up above. 2 stocks were up above 5%. Lowe's on good earnings again. And this time, apparently, the CEO didn't put his foot in his mouth. Their earnings rose 9.3%. And Netflix was up 6%. You had 5 stocks that were up more than 3%, but less than 5%. And those were Microsoft, NextEra Energy, which is a utility that is a solar company, NVIDIA, Cisco and Cisco Systems. Cisco was up 3.1, Nvidia was up 3.1, NextEra Energy was up 3.4, Microsoft was up 3.9%, and United Health was up 5%. Again, largest companies, below them, you had 4 companies that were up more than 2, but less than 3%. 9 companies that were up more than 1%, but less than 2%. Only 3 companies that were up, but up less than 1%. 10 companies that were down, but down less than 1%. 3 companies that were down more than 1%, but less than 2%. 8 companies that were down more than 2%, but less than 3%. 6 companies that were down more than 3%, but I take that back. 4 companies that were down more than 3%, but then less than 5%, and 6 companies that were down more than 5%. And those were Tesla, again, one of the larger corporations, down 5.2%. ConocoPhillips, down 5.7%. ExxonMobil, both energy companies, down 7.1%. Kinder Morgan, another energy company, but a pipeline company, down 7.4%. Chevron, down 7.5%, so overwhelmingly the energy sector. And Bank America was down, Boeing Aircraft, back to can't getting a plane in the air, fell another 9.3% for the week. If we look at my hedges really briefly, remember on the stocks in the portfolio, I lost $946, but hedges returned $957. So we had a gain of $11. Stuff like Kinder Morgan should have subtracted $320 from my portfolio, but the options repriced, dropped some premium, and I made they returned the difference in the options, the call options that I had, increased $458. So I made money on that one. ExxonMobil should have subtracted $302 from the portfolio, but the hedges returned $252 of that. Air Products and Chemicals should have subtracted $175. Hedges returned $170 of it. Target should have subtracted $163, but hedges made up $133. 3M should have subtracted $134, but hedges made up $123. And JP Morgan should have subtracted $119, but hedges returned $128. On the upside, I should have made $184 in Microsoft, but the hedges cost me $133. Should have made $123 in Costco, but the hedges cost me $107. Should have made $93 on Thermo Fisher, but the hedges cost me $100. So anyway, as my portfolio sits, about a third is in cash. I got last week on last Friday, one of my hedge positions expired, and the stock in S&P Global got called away. In other words, I put a hedge on it. What date did I put the hedge on it? July 3rd. I put a hedge on it on July 3rd, dated August 20th, because it had the most premium. There was no opportunity to renew it on favorable terms, and it expired, so they took my stock. I sold my stock adjusted for the premium that I got when I sold the call option, pressed the price of the call option at about $422 a share. When they did their earnings, their stock went from $415 a share all the way to $430, and it just never came back since, and so there was no opportunity. So they took my stock at $422 a share, and on the day that they took it, it was trading for $437.52 a share. If I would have not hedged the position at all and just sold it on that date, I would have made 19%. With the hedges, it turns out I made 15%. But anyway, that stock's gone. So I'm down to 23 stocks in my portfolio and 30% cash. And that's it. This has been it's Tuesday. Name of the show is The Bogdanich Perspective on Spotify, YouTube, and blah, blah, blah. The best place to find it is at home here, TalkCast PDX, on the web at talkcastpdx.com. Join me next Tuesday. If you want to send me an email or something, Paul at StockBettor, Paul at StockBettor.com, and do widzenia. That means goodbye, and sorry for being late.
I'm Dave Dahl, creator of Dave's Killer Bread, a well-known, against-the-odds success story. To give back, we built a podcast studio called TalkCast PDX, a state-of-the-art facility to produce your own podcast. TalkCast PDX is a place where every opinion is accepted. If you've ever thought about it, do it. Use your voice and make a difference at TalkCast PDX.